Hello and welcome back to Warcraft Daily for today, the 19th of March 2014. So one thing before we get into the show, it may be a tiny bit shorter than normal, I'm not particularly sure. Basically, I ended up contracting some sort of annoying cold and then eating lots of chili, meaning that I don't feel particularly well at the minute. So yeah, fantastic times ahead. But the good news is that there is a lot of cool stuff going on with World of Warcraft. First of all, we have got some interesting news about normal and heroic cross-realm raids, then a PvP interview, and finally a snippet from the upcoming World of Warcraft War Crimes novel. So first of all, normal and heroic cross-realm raids. Well, they're going to be a thing now, despite quite a few blue posts to the contrary, actually. Now what this means is that you can use OQ or something like that to create cross-realm normal groups. You could, of course, just do it the old-fashioned way, with friends. But why would you do this? Well, you will, of course, gain access to normal and heroic-only Siege of Orgrimmar rewards, like the Liberator and Conqueror titles, the Kor'kron Warwolf, and then the Kor'kron Iron Juggernaut mount. Overall, it's pretty damn cool, and then, of course, it means you can play with your friends. You know, if people are in different servers and they want to play with each other, now they can. That's absolutely fantastic. And this is, of course, mimicking the way that things will be like for normal and heroic raids in Warlords of Draenor. Now, while the Siege of Orgrimmar heroic is cross-realm, the Warlords of Draenor equivalent difficulty will still be using the traditional raid system of being limited to one server with a non-flexible raid ID lockout system. That might not mean a lot to you if you don't do heroic raids, but if you do, then you know what that means. So yeah, as for the cross-realm groups themselves, they're still going to have the master looting system, personal loot isn't in, and both normal and heroic cross-realm raids will follow the exact same lockout system as current day raids do. So overall, I suppose this is pretty good. It gives more people options, which is hardly a bad thing. One definite benefit, though, is that it will allow the cross-pollination of heroic raiders across continents, across the continent they're in, and that should kind of just spice up the population for people getting together with mythic modes and warlords. Of course, most raid guilds at the minute are 25 player, which of course means they'll probably have about 30 plus players in terms of an active raiding roster. Now, mythic modes and warlords are going to be 20 person, so there's going to be some kind of rejangling of the population. This should hopefully help with that. Another good thing that it'll do is it will allow for a cheap way for these heroic raiders to play with each other, because previously, if you wanted to, do a trial run with another guild, you would have had to swap over to their server so that you could play a raid with them. Now that won't happen anymore, so definitely a good thing. Alright, so next up, we have an interview about PvP. Recently there was actually a PvP tournament. It was during the weekend. It was actually on during the time that I did my live stream. By the way, check out my live stream, link in the description. And overall it was a pretty good tournament. They certainly did have some things to fix up after the first day, but I tuned into the second day. The audio quality was better, the matches were pretty good, so it was definitely nice to see it do well. In fact, I know at one point I think they were at 20,000 plus live viewers, which for World of Warcraft is extremely good, since it's widely considered to not really be as good a spectator sport as, say, StarCraft 2, League of Legends, or Dota. Overall, very good to hear. Now, during this during this PvP live event, there was an interview with Halinka. So let's just cover the interview. It was with Brian Halinka, by the way, who is the main PvP designer. So first of all, in terms of just esports in general, he said that they are looking into ways to just make World of Warcraft a better esport as a whole. Now, of course, they are adding Spectator mode in Warlords of Draenor, so it will be nice to get official support for that. But still, I think World of Warcraft can definitely do better in terms of its esport functionality. Right now, there's no real in-game ladders, similar to, say, the StarCraft 2 system, where you get promoted to different leagues, and, so someone could be a Grandmasters player instead of just being a certain rating. Hell, they could even just rebrand ratings, so, yeah, you have your rating, but that will correspond to a league, a little bit like what they do in Hearthstone. I think that would be a nice way of incentivizing play and just providing a more satisfying progression model in terms of rising up the ranks. Now, as for esport things in general, well, really they just need to support more tournaments, and they need to be sure that they do not repeat the mistakes of the WCS tournament for StarCraft 2. Basically, they did a weekly tournament for StarCraft 2 that lasted many months, and what it did was just essentially butcher a lot of other very well-established tournaments, and it burnt people out to the point where the StarCraft 2 scene started just floundering. And that is a trend that is sadly continuing. So I don't think they'll do that again with World of Warcraft, but the question is, what should they do? Well, I think that they should basically continue supporting third-party events that are maybe a weekend-long thing. I think there's definitely room for a weekly league in PvP. I just think that what most people are interested in is actually a weekend tournament where you get 16 teams, stick in, I don't know, a dual elimination format or something, and let them have at it. Because in that one weekend, there's a bit of a story going on there, players can follow teams easily, and it's far more accessible. I think that's probably the right way to focus their esports. He also said that right now, the team mostly kind of just focuses on 3v3 arenas, but they want to hear what the community wants in regards to esports, PvP, or otherwise. That's kind of interesting. I've never really seen many people do 5v5s, and it certainly seems like they have been putting a lot of focus on 3v3s. And really, any time I hear about arena, it seems to be 3v3, so I guess that's a thing. I'm not a major arena person, honestly. I do try to get into the arenas from time to time, but I just don't get a lot of time to do that. Still though, 3v3 has been very fun nearly every time I've went in. It's certainly been a lot more fun, to me anyway, than 2v2. Because 2v2 it's just weird, you know? If you're a healer and a DPS, you probably won the majority of your matches. And it just seems like 3v3 is a little bit more balanced with World of Warcraft's class mechanics. Okay, so next, Linka said that arenas are a large part of what makes World of Warcraft an esport, but there may be other parts of WoW that players would be interested in. For example, things like the live raid at BlizzCon. Yeah, absolutely. Though I think the best way of doing a live raid is actually not setting it in a pre-existing raid. They should just set it in some sort of, like, arena room or something, and then just spawn boss gauntlets and do things that are actually really interesting so that these raid groups are properly challenged. I don't think that doing a timed, basically a time trial through Siege of Orgrimmar is very compelling for the viewer. I mean, okay, they can relate it to what they do in game, but if you just see this really cool, badass, like, boss gauntlet thing, well, you want to watch that because it's different, and you get to see these players being pushed to the absolute limit. I think that would be the best way to do a PvE esport. And then, of course, things like rated battlegrounds could become an esport-ish thing, but I think that most players would prefer to watch arenas. Correct me if I'm wrong, and perhaps if you think that there's a rated battleground format that would work, certainly let me know in the comments. I'll be, sure to have a read and sort of soak in your opinion. So that'll be good. Then, he also said that some other partners have reached out to Blizzard to see just what sort of tools they're going to be putting in for World of Warcraft esports, and this actually includes Major League Gaming. That is certainly rather interesting. I cannot see World of Warcraft being a major thing at MLG, as in being a major part of one of their live events. I could certainly see MLG doing a monthly tournament, maybe similar to, I don't know, the StarCraft 2 Clan Wars. I think that could happen, but other than that, I'm not particularly sure. Still though, it would be nice if they would put in an extremely robust spectator mode. It has to be very good, because that's just the crux of what makes a good esports viewing experience. Next, Linka said that PvP can often be hard to watch, especially with things like, say, a team deathmatch being a little bit more fast-paced in some other games. But in World of Warcraft, games are often rather long in Arena, and it takes quite a while for someone to die or something exciting to happen, really, because if you just look at the class mechanics and the way healing works in WoW, it takes a long time for those incremental, small victories to actually lead to something that's fun to watch, like someone getting an execute crit for 80k and killing an enemy healer or something. If you only have the potential for there to be 5 or 6 deaths in a 15 to 20 minute period, then I guess the amount of sort of action per second is a little bit lower than it would be in, say, StarCraft 2, where every single moment is probably relevant to the outcome of the game. Just that every single moment in StarCraft 2 is probably a little bit easier to read for the viewer because, oh, that guy built a barracks, that guy's dude shot that guy's dude. Whereas in World of Warcraft, there's a lot of things like buffs and debuffs and silences and a lot of instant cast spells that are perhaps a little bit less readable from a viewer experience, which could make it a bit harder to watch. I think that's definitely an inherent problem to World of Warcraft, but it's certainly one that they can mitigate. And then next, he also said that the game has to be fun before it can be Yeah, it has to be fun to play before it can be fun to watch, and he said that the next step is having tools to make it easy to watch, such as the Spectator mode, which absolutely makes sense. And then finally he said that the developers are looking at some smaller things that they can do to grow the World of Warcraft esports community. I'm guessing that mainly just involves supporting Twitch streamers and doing that kind of thing, supporting tournaments like what they did with the PvP Live tournament. Okay, then next we have some talk about Spectator mode. So what Halinka said is that being able to set the time before dampening activates in Spectator mode games is not planned right now because it would lead to inconsistent rules in arenas. I think that's fair enough. You do want there to be a same rule set the whole way. But, well, from an esport perspective and the perspective of making it fun to watch, you definitely don't want 20-minute matches in WoW, because a 20-minute World of Warcraft arena match is going to have far, far less going on than 20 minutes in a StarCraft match, or hell, even 20 minutes in a good LoL match, or a Dota match. So, it's definitely a worry, and I wonder what it would be like if they just activated dampening from the get-go. Or do they even do that now? I'm not particularly sure. I know that sometimes, like in the BlizzCon arena tournament, they actually activated dampening a lot sooner than normal. Not particularly sure. So, yeah. Now, in terms of some Warlords of Draenor specific talk, he said that if the team makes a balance change, the players often get upset with the changes that were made, but if they don't make the changes, then players complain about it feeling stale and perhaps, falling prey to some sort of perceived imbalance. That's just an inherent part of making an MMO, I'm afraid, and it's just hard, people will justify their own viewpoint using whatever cherry-picked, snippets of information they can possibly get, which means that feedback from individuals is nigh on worthless, unless that individual is at the absolute top of their game. What matters is metadata, and I guess that's just the kind of thing that they can harvest using in-game tools and that sort of thing. Okay, so next he said that the team has been trying to increase participation in PvP without hurting the game for people who already love PvP. Well, what we've heard is that with the addition of those 2 new mounts in patch 5.4, 3v3 participation went up ginormously, and the same thing happened with the removal of the arena team system. Overall, it sounds like it's been pretty good, and I can say that it certainly got me a little bit back into PvP. Okay, so next he said that the way that CCs, or crowd controls, and diminishing returns work is actually rather obscure to players. A lot of people don't understand it, and there's honestly not much of an in-game UI sort of representation for it, but it is of course extremely important to the way the competitive PvP works. A lot of teams know that if they chain the same kind of CC on a player, then the diminishing returns will overall decrease their effectiveness, and if they do that over a large period of time, it could lead to a loss. So they want to make this less complex for players, because they like it when complexity adds depth, but complexity that's basically obscured from the game's UI and is really not really readily available just doesn't give any depth. Because honestly, you're not going to know if there's some sort of heavy DR unless you're paying ultra close attention to the rest of the players, which you absolutely should be doing. But when there's no UI element, I don't think you can really expect a player to react to something. Alright, so let's round off the show with a bit of a chat about the upcoming book, War Crimes. Basically, they released an excerpt for it. It's pretty interesting. It's just Anduin chatting to Garrosh when Garrosh is in his, his big chain prison thingy. Actually, it seems a little bit like what happens after the Visions of Time cinematic cutscene thingy, where Anduin just walks up to Garrosh's cage. Well, it seems like this is the part of the book that is based on, or perhaps vice versa. But yeah, I'm not going to spoil what it is, because obviously the people who care about it will want to read it themselves, so yeah, go do that. I still need to start reading the World of Warcraft books, though. Because I need to know the lore. I do know the lore, but often I think you get a little bit more depth and understanding, and especially sort of a more emotional depth of the characters if you read the books, so I'll probably do that at some point, but not right now. Anyway, that is it for today's Warcraft Daily. Sorry if things were a little bit incoherent. My head's kind of a big fuzzy mess at the minute because of the lovely cold and chilly mix, which is not great, so yeah, that's fun. Anyway, things to pimp before we end the show. Go check out my twitch.tv stream. I did plan on streaming tonight, but obviously that's not going to happen. And then just, Twitter, Twitter, Patreon, etc. All that stuff. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.